Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. We are honored to have Noah Rothman joining us from Commentary Magazine and the new book, Unjust Social Justice and the Unmaking of America from Regnery. Mr. Rothman, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And let me just say this. I am so impressed with your appearances on national television. I don't know how you keep it together during your multiple MSNBC appearances, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Everybody's very kind over there, and when the cameras are on, we do battle. But when the curtain closes, it's a collegial atmosphere.
You know, you find a way though to diffuse a lot of these arguments with logic and reason, and I'm sure that goes into your book, Unjust Social Justice and the Unmaking of America. But what is your background? I'm looking at you and I'm going, this is a young guy, very smart, very articulate, and you just kind of declaw these folks, and it's usually like 7-on-1.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. I wish I was as young as apparently I look on camera. I'm nearing 40 at this point, and it's weighing on my conscience. But I've been in the business for about 10 years of opinion and editorial, and I came to this through a stint on talk radio. Actually, I was producing talk radio out in New York City for many years, and became infatuated with the business of persuasion through forms of entertainment and communication. And so that's kind of how I approach this thing, trying to be, as you say, as persuasive as possible and as factually accurate and compelling and yet, personable and not disagreeable. It's difficult at times, but I appreciate that you think it's effective.
Well, it is. And let's just talk about the crazy world we live in, where everything that was right is wrong. Where are we going? And if you could, tell us a little bit about the research that you've done for this book and why we should buy it.
Sure. For the social justice is sort of this malleable term. For most Americans, they probably would consider it, because its activists don't really have a common definition for it, they'd probably consider it a catch-all term to generally describe social comity and righting historical wrongs and relatively unobjectionable things. In practice, however, it has become something much different. It has transformed its activists into bitter and angry and aggressive people without interest in compromise. It inspires racial hierarchies and, in fact, dictates the creation of social contracts that create racial hierarchies and force social leveling upon certain demographics. Affirmative action or positive discrimination is designed to lift people up in theory, and that necessitates some negative discrimination, but that used to be collateral damage. It was sotto voce, the sort of thing that you didn't actually emphasize. Now, negative discrimination is the point. The design is to force certain demographics based on their accidents of birth, perceived historical injustices, and the privileges, quote unquote, that are accrued to them, and to force that down upon them. It is a bitter philosophy that has no redeeming traits. And the book is designed to identify both right and the left, by the way. This is mostly a phenomenon of the left, but not exclusively. And I describe in detail the ways in which the right has become seduced by a lot of these tenets, and hopefully prescribe some ways in which you can identify social justice in the wild and isolate it and stigmatize it, and hopefully try to reverse these trends, which I think are very dangerous for the future of the country.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about language. Tom Brokaw finds himself in a little trouble by saying people should assimilate and learn English. You've got the Duke professor saying that the international Chinese students should speak English. Is that an example of social justice on steroids?
Well, it's certainly not unobjectionable to say that assimilation should be continuing apace, but I actually tackle this issue in the book in Chapter 3 in one of the chapters that identifies truths that saying out loud will really aggravate social justice activists. And among them are some of the truths that really aggravate the left, like the notion that there really are only two genders, and the fact that there's, for example, racism in this country is not as bad as it was 50 years ago. These are the things that you can't really say without inspiring an irrational response to them, because they are, you can't refute them. They're factually accurate, but they make people uncomfortable. There's a truth on the right that it makes people uncomfortable. And that is the fact that Hispanics, Hispanic Americans, and Muslim immigrants are assimilating at rates that are comparable to every other immigrant group that we've had in this country in the past. Every piece of demographic and social science that we have indicates that. And to say that out loud really frustrates a particular group of social activists on the right and the left, but primarily on the right. Again, this is not a phenomenon that is limited exclusively to the left, and it's the kind of thing that when you say this and you support it with science and data, that they reject it very vehemently. And that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to address in this book and break down those preconceptions, because they are preconceptions, and they create a perception of the country that is unfair and doesn't really exist.
Unjust, Social Justice, and the Unmaking of America. Noah Rothman joining us, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Hope, Noah, my formatics are okay. As an old producer, I hope that brings you back a little to our formatics. I'm sure you learned a lot about that back in the day.
I sure did, absolutely. Yeah, I was on the other side of the microphone for a long time.
Exactly. So we take a look at the whole social justice movement, and where do we go from here? How do we, on the right, counteract it? Because, again, if you're conservative, if you're religious, if you're Christian, it seems to be that you feel marginalized, and that's obviously one of the appeals that helped the president get elected.
Yeah, I mean, and I try not to overstate the problem here. The militant social justice left and right are small segments of a broader body of political opinion. And while I think the threat is real and growing, I don't mean to overstate it. There's time yet to reverse these trends because these people are outnumbered. But it requires men and women of good faith, patriotic Americans, to identify and address these problems head on. And there's a way to do it. Republicans have models to appeal to, and Democrats too. In the late 1940s, the Democratic Party engaged in a rather systematic effort to expel the communists in organized labor from the movement, and it was very successful. And I demonstrate how that was done. Similarly, the Republican Party was in a difficult position in the late 1950s, early 1960s, when the Bircher movement became a much more popular movement. It was radical, it was paranoid, and it had become the focus of the president and of Congress, and it was becoming a stain on the conservative movement. And the conservative movement organized a very systematic and concerted and clever effort to stigmatize those ideas, not people. So the thing is, what people who adhere to these ideas seem to believe is that when you say that your ideas should be stigmatized, that they feel like their existence is threatened. No political coalition with an interest in its own survival would expel its own members. And I don't think that's possible or even wise. But it is possible to identify ideas that are anathema and create a social stigma around them because they are dangerous to the cause, because they're counterproductive. And I think that some of these ideas around social justice, which are unrealizable and make people bitter and either force them to withdraw or act out extra politically, sometimes violently, that they are dangerous ideas and they need to be treated as such. And so I do provide some ways in which a reader can see how you can go about identifying ideas that are dangerous for the future of your political coalition and for your hopes for the future, and to effect some sort of a change to bring the party and your political ideas more into line with what a general consensus would be around them, and make them more appealing to a general electorate so that they can be realized in the real world. And that's the whole point of political activism, right? To make your ideas palatable to a majority of Americans.
Well, how do you think this whole social justice, we continue to embrace it? And, again, you're on the front lines there on TV all the time about it. How does it play for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination?
Well, that's sort of the thing. I mean, when I was originally writing this book years and years ago, it takes a long time to get a book to market. And I was thinking that it was going to come to market too late. But it seems like it's been a cosmic gift to the release of this book that is coming out right at the start of the 2020 primary cycle. Its adherence to the basic tenets of social justice, which are again very divisive and un-American in many ways, in my view, are going to be things that the primary field is going to adhere to because they are so popular with a narrow but vocal and active and aggressive Democratic base. And I think that it's going to shine a light on a lot of these policy prescriptions, which are retributive and again affect social leveling downward towards Americans of certain demographic persuasions, majoritarian persuasions that are perceived to be quote unquote privileged in intersectional philosophy, men, heterosexuals, people who are Caucasian and of socioeconomic backgrounds that are perceived to be more stable than others. Those prescriptions, downward leveling, the scapegoating of these individuals is becoming more and more of an imperative for Democratic partisans. And so you're going to see more and more of that, going to alienate more and more centrist Americans, independent Americans, and of course conservatives. But it's not going to alienate a lot of Democratic activists. It's exactly what they want to hear. And so I think that this book is going to be important for people who want to understand where that's coming from, why it's dangerous, and how to stop it.
Finally, what do you make of the whole white privilege argument? Do you address that in the book?
Yes, I do. It's sort of a facet of what I described as intersectional philosophy, which was an academic framework established by Kimberly Crenshaw. And again, as an academic framework for understanding prejudice, it's not reasonable, I suppose. I mean, it's not completely out of left field. It's the idea, basically, that prejudice is doled out in degrees, and that a black woman, for example, will experience more prejudice than a black man because being a man provides you with slightly more privilege in society than being a woman. But in practice, it becomes a toxic philosophy, one, because it compels you to think of yourself and your neighbors as inhabiting this complex matrix of discrimination in which everyone is your adversary. And it's obviously an embittering philosophy. And in practice, as a means for establishing a political coalition, it's very counterproductive. And you can see this in how the Women's March essentially imploded, where there's no such thing as a political ally. You are an ally only insofar as you inhabit these certain accidents of birth. And if you have accidents of birth that are quote-unquote privileged, that cuts against you and means that you are a less valuable member of the coalition. And they kind of got wrapped up in this whole identity politics competition, and it alienated quite a few members of the coalition that would otherwise have been quite helpful to maintain its original popularity. That's kind of a cautionary tale, but I don't think anybody's taken the right lessons from it. Democrats certainly haven't, because it's still a very popular philosophy, and it's one that is fortunately, it stops this movement from being so potent that it can continue to maintain its influence. But at the same time, because it's not losing any popularity, it's most certainly going to continue to be part of this organizing philosophy. Social justice is identity politics in practice. It is an alternative theory of societal organization, a governing philosophy, and it's one that is antithetical to the American experience and counterproductive for people who want to achieve a just and egalitarian society. And that's what this book is about, going back to an egalitarian idea of what America means.
Noah Rothman joining us. Unjust, his new book. Finally, what about your personal journey? Usually folks that are producers or in the broadcast film field very rarely go into print, go into to writing. How did that happen for you?
Well, I was actually going to college on a performing arts scholarship, believe it or not. And I was a sophomore in college when 9/11 happened. And I wanted to change my career path in order to get more into political events. And so I moved over to WABC in New York and stayed there for a long time. And the radio business, as you might know, in the last decade was a little volatile. The business was shrinking, and it was difficult for me to maintain work as a talk radio producer because talk radio was shrinking as the demand was shrinking for my skill set of just a barely skilled talk radio producer. So I went back to school and started learning about international relations and affairs, and I started writing. And I had always liked writing, and it turned out that I was kind of good at it. So I just kept doing that for a decade and made a career out of it. But I still love radio. It was my very first love as a profession, and I'm never going to get completely away from broadcasting. That's why I'm dabbling a little bit in behind the camera work these days. But writing is the bread and butter, but the love is definitely what you do right behind the microphone.
Well, I'm sure you know our old friend Curtis Sliwa, and You can never get a word in with Curtis. Always. I love Curtis. Snitches end in the ditches. And anyway, Noah Rothman, Unjust. We urge folks to get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. A privilege. We enjoy watching you on the television, and let you know, people in flyover country love what you do, and keep on keeping on, brother.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, Noah Rothman joining us. And again, you can catch him on TV, but talking about just the history of social justice. And that's really what we try to do. We not only talk about the issues that impact you, and Ray Amaya, thank you for that outstanding guest, but we get these newsmakers, we bring them to our world, to our bedrooms, to our cars, and we get a chance to hear the history, in-depth history of these social justice jabronis and how they vilify folks. The controversy continuing over poor Tom Brokaw that said people just need to assimilate and learn to speak English. Well, that's a bad thing. Okay, well, if you don't speak English, if there's no unifying factor, then what is there? Number one. Number two, you still have the devious little libs going crazy, having a good time, saying, na, we back down President Trump. Well, if that's the case, if you did back down President Trump, what's going to happen in 2 or 3 weeks? Really, what's going to happen in 2 or 3 weeks? You're going to shut the government down again? And by the way, towards the end of it, according to an opinion poll that was not released until after the shutdown was over, the most unpopular politician in the country wasn't President Trump, Nancy Pelosi. But you won't hear that anywhere else. You're listening to Kevin Miller on not one, but 2 radio stations, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. And I'm Kevin Miller. We go to the phones and joined by Liberal Steve. Good morning, sir.
Buenos Dias, Idaho. Well, it's just in what I think. And I think Noah, your gentleman you had on, Noah's been around a while, but he's a young punk, or however you want to say it, and not in a bad way. I mean, he is 50% Native American, and I think he does smoke a little bit of that New Jersey peace pipe.
What do you mean by he's a young punk, but in a good way? There's no such thing as a good punk.
A punk, a smoker. He's a weed smoker, I believe.
That's an unsubstantiated allegation, and you should rescind that unless you have substantial information.
No, I can think whatever I want.
Then you need to say in your opinion.
I did. I say it's my opinion that he smokes too much of the peace pipe.
Allegedly.
And his wife is full-blooded Latino, which,
Are you going to get to something relevant? This is a great guest who just debunked a lot of issues on social justice. And you're just, why are you, what is the point of this? What is the point of this?
He's a great guy.
What is the point of, well, his wife's this and I think that? Do you have something to comment on?
Yes, I do. If you would just close it for a minute. I know it's your show.
No. I just want you to say something. I had somebody the other day saying, I like the characters, I like the contributors, but you let them go on. And I'm just listening and I'm going, what are you saying? I love you, but what are you saying?
He does go after Trump quite a bit with his head-scratching policies, and he's okay. That's all I'm saying. He's not the best guest in the world to have on, but he's got his points and his value. And he got his start, mainly in that, what is it, Sirius Radio or whatever it is?
WABC in New York, right.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, now that
okay, what are you saying?
Trump's not going to shut down anything in 3 weeks. Okay, that's a guarantee. He's not stupid. He's already cost the country how much? $8 billion.
I'm still waiting. So, what are you saying?
About what?
Exactly.
He's not going to. You said he's going to shut the wall down. What are you going to do when he shuts the wall down in another 3 weeks?
Shuts the wall down. How do you shut down the wall?
The government wall.
The government wall. There's a government wall?
The government's one steady wall.
What have you been? What did you have for breakfast?
A little of that Oregon. What do you call it?
And that's one thing that I can't wait to really discuss is the folks in Ontario, Oregon, opening up 3 pot shops. Can you believe that? Three shops, and they say it's all going to be for people in Idaho. Well, you know something? There are a few people here that have an issue with it. Myself and the the governor. He's been lieutenant governor for so long. Governor Little, myself, the Idaho legislature. We're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let that happen. And by the way, let's have the ISP right there. So you go over to Ontario. We're gonna do some stop and frisks things. Well, not really, but it sounded good.
Let's keep them over there doing all that by domestics and real burglaries and real things. Real mean people run around and do real mean things and rob banks and do everything else. And let's have them stopping people, checking them for cannabis. What a joke when you say stuff like that. And for how long did you say, there will never be hemp in Idaho, never be hemp? Now the whole United States
there'll never be hemp in Idaho. Still not in Idaho.
And now the whole United States can grow hemp and use it. And Kramer, our major stock guy in the United States, he's saying invest now because in 2019 it'll all be legal. He's claiming it'll all be legal. And it'll be decriminalized. So, you got to get your head out of where, Miller.
Right.
And bring it into the 20th century.
Really? Because
you and some of your listeners, not all of your listeners, are lost when it comes to progressive and moving forward.
You know something? We are the watchers on the wall. That's who we are.
Can't you write your own movie?
We are the watchers on the wall.
You got to go to the Game of Thrones to grab an analogy that doesn't make any sense. Watchers on the wall.
We are the watchers on the wall. We are the keepers of the flame.
Yes.
Well, we love America. We think America is the greatest country in the world. And quite frankly, we don't like the social justice warriors, the pro-pot smokers that want to take over our great nation.
Our people on our side, which is the majority, is the flame.
Well, apparently it wasn't the majority in the presidential election, now was it?
Well, we were the majority. If it wasn't for that stupid electorate, or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, the Constitution, the stupid Constitution.
Yeah, the stupid Constitution.
Right, the stupid Constitution, right.
The majority should always win. Mobs should always rule, period.
Right.
And it's our spark that's going to start the fire that burns that conservative empire to the ground, period.
Well, you've been very entertaining this morning. Thank you very much.
Well, you stay fired up and tell Max anytime, anywhere, anyway.
Yeah, you don't really believe that because you never follow through with it.
It makes me sad when you talk like that.
It's the truth.
It's sad.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that spirited debate. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning. All right, out to Tanya J. Powers, Fox News Radio. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we've got a situation now, more Bible classes in public schools, and the president's okay with it. What's up?
Yeah, there was a tweet yesterday, as a matter of fact. He had apparently seen the Fox and Friends segment where he was talking about, they were talking about, Bible classes in schools, basically. And this, this was an interesting thing because some of the states actually tried making, putting the Bible in schools as a historical, course, basically, a literary historical document or text, so to speak. 3 states tried to do this legislation-wise last year, Alabama, Iowa, and West Virginia. They failed. Excuse me. Now, in Kentucky, it did pass in 2017, not just as, and this is for public high schools, not just as a, we're going to put the Bible in historical context, but also Hebrew scriptures as well. So there has been, cases of this working. The legislation is now being introduced in 6 other states, so it's kind of moving through there as, kind of as we speak, I guess. It'll remain to be seen how it does there.
Well, again, of course, what the reaction will be. Will people bring this to court? Have they, in the Kentucky case, have people filed lawsuits, or is it too soon to tell?
It's kind of soon to tell, actually. I'm not really sure, if there have been lawsuits. I would assume that they're still working their way through the court if there has been, because, again, that was 2017. But, again, if you make sure and put it in the law that it is historical and not, from a religious standpoint, then that's kind of the way that the law is sort of loosely interpreted at this point. I don't know what each individual law, the way that the legislation is written, because they may have different ways of putting that. I'm sure it's probably not a mandate, but I don't know. I haven't read their individual wording on that.
Well, it's interesting that the president continues to watch Fox and Friends.
Yes, there was that tweet came after that. He said numerous states introducing Bible literacy classes, giving students the option of studying the Bible, starting to make a turn back. Great was the tweet.
Well, the country's going in the right direction.
Well, that's what he seems to think. So, I'm sure there are a lot of people who agree with that. There obviously is going to be pushback. I mean, the ACLU was opposed to those three pieces of legislation last year in those other three states. So, I would expect we would hear more from them as this kind of goes on in the six that are now looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. Tanya J. Powers, you're familiar with the Bible in public schools from your days in the South.
We didn't study the Bible, but
the Bible was always very present.
Well, especially if you were in trouble in the principal's office.
Yep, back in the days when you used to get swats in the hallway. Not you, but me.
Not me personally, no.
My time in Georgia, I did. That was always fun. I miss that.
I think you don't, but
Not the swatting, getting swatted, but other people. But anyway, that was my attempt to save this segment. Great content from you as always. I give myself a C- on this one. You, as always, ma'am, an A+.
Thank you. Don't be so rough on yourself.
Well, I'll remember that. I'm still mourning the loss with Clemson, but thank you, ma'am.
All right, thanks.
Tanya J. Powers joining us. Remember, when you hear Fox News on the radio in the Treasure Valley, you're hearing KIDO Talk Radio on 107.5 FM, 580 AM.
And made it official in a letter, with Pelosi writing, "When I wrote you on January 23rd, I stated that we should work together to find a mutually agreeable date when government has reopened to schedule this year's State of the Union address. In our conversation today, we agreed on February 5th. President Trump replied, "It is my great honor to accept. We have a great story to tell and yet great goals to achieve. I look forward to seeing you on the 5th.
There we have it. The State of the Union is back on February 5th. Hank in Boise with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. I happened to come across the book and started reading it and going through. It was The Making of the President 2016 by Roger Stone, how Donald Trump orchestrated a revolution. And even though Stone doesn't make the inference, I'll make the inference, because when you connect the dots and cross the T's in this was a payback by the Clintons for what Roger Stone did. It was Roger Stone that rearranged those Juanita Broderick, and according to his own book, and those other women to show up on I think in the second or third presidential debate. And the photograph you see in the book of the fear that was absolutely on Bill Clinton, and it's plainly clear
Now wait a minute, I thought that was Steve Bannon that did that.
Well, he's just playing out in the campaign. I think that he played a role. Another one that they played a role in was the written. Where the Clinton, Bill Clinton comes into your town, get your Bill Clinton rape whistle. And that was the biggest selling T-shirt in the whole entire campaign. It got so popular that they even put out a Bill Clinton a rape whistle besides the T-shirt.
Well, that's lovely to hear so early in the morning, yes.
Well, the point of it is this: I think that consider how close Weinstein was to Hillary. I think the viciousness that they came back on, and Corsi's role, and why Corsi was targeted, was because he went when the Judicial Watch put out the suit, and eventually some of those State Department emails. He went through the whole bunch of them, and he discovered that one was not completely redacted. And they gave the address of Abedin Huma at yahoo.com, and then by going through there, and there was an investigation in there, they discovered the whole slug. They found not only a third of a million State Department stuff in there, but she was forwarding all the secret stuff into her archive, where she was basically forwarding the stuff into her own private server.
Well, it's a sad point in America, though, Hank, and having lived it myself personally, which is what brought me to Idaho, is that if you it doesn't matter if you're right. If the political elite decide to take you down, they take you down. And case in point, you take a look at Dr. Corsi, who has been a fly in the Clintons and the Obamas for many, many years. Roger Stone, Donald Trump, the way Obama tried to limit social conservatism, the way it's vilified today. Case in point, part two, you look at the Covington, Kentucky kids. They didn't do anything wrong, but it was so much of a hassle. Why would anybody put themselves through that again? Death threats, threats that they won't get into college, all these things that are untrue. And to your greater point, now we see this with Mr. Stone, although Mr. Stone does throw quite a few rocks a bit and doesn't have a problem. I mean, when we had him on, he openly, gleefully talked about the dark arts and being a master of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff he shows in the book. If you go through the book, he discusses a bunch of them that they pulled on the Clintons, and the thing is, and also the introduction of, and then there's a photograph of Danny Williams, who's basically reputed to be a black man who's reputed to be fathered by Bill Clinton. This was with Roger Stone. So and he was sent to many of the Clinton rallies. So I definitely think that had a lot to do with the thing. It was both the intimidation and payback, both at the same time, were the motivations for the Gestapo or NKV thing of knocking in the middle of the night with all the agents, and also the warning to others who decided to cross what you call the elite. And of course, of Corsi, it was because of that they were Jim Comey was forced to reopen that thing before the election. It was a clumsy attempt, basically, to try to exonerate Hillary before the election, because they were, like I said, there were literally thousands of secret, and some stuff that was so super sensitive in there that they didn't know that they had. That was in those Huma archives. I think, and I suspect strongly, that what Abedin Huma was doing was that she was doing espionage on behalf of the Islamic Brotherhood. This is what I think was going on with that.
Fair enough, Hank. Thank you for the call. Appreciate you listening to KIDO Talk Radio. Max in Garden City. Good morning, sir. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning to you, sir. Well, unfortunately, I missed Liberal Steve. He's interesting this morning. Obviously, he probably has got some more wacky weed. Steve, can you hear me? You're a Welsher. You owe Kevin a steak dinner. You're a Welsher. You owe me a debate. You're a Welsher. You know what a Welsher is, Steve? That's somebody who fails to follow through on a commitment, a liar, a promise breaker. Let's get off that. Kevin, maybe I'm wrong, but a growing number of people are beginning to believe that we will have a state of emergency coming soon.
Right.
I'm very sure that Congress is not going to reciprocate. They're not going to offer anything serious. Queen Pelosi's going to stand in the way. And last night I heard an interesting theory. Somebody said that Pelosi is banking on a collusional charge against both the president and Mr. Pence, because if they were impeached and dispossessed, she would become the president.
Well, that's an interesting theory you're bringing up right now that no one has brought up to at the moment, nationally or locally.
Well, think about this. She's the Speaker of the House. Should the president and vice president become incapacitated, the law states that the powers of the presidency fall to her. Wouldn't it be simple for her wouldn't it be wonderful if they could get Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence out of office? She would automatically rise to the throne. And then woe to the republic. It's something to toss around. And I want to join you with something. Governor Little, get off your chair and repeal the food tax. You said you'd remind him every day. I'm helping you remind him every day.
I appreciate that, Max.
Tax on food is horrible. But the good work. Maybe one time we can hook up, do something, Idaho Insights, or maybe we can have a debate with Steve. I'd love to beat him up again. Take care, pal.
Thank you, Max. God bless. Kevin Miller here, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, on your home for Hannity, KIDO Talk Radio. And coming up between now and Glenn Beck, I do want to talk about this story in The Statesman We'll react to it, that there are many people in Ontario excited because they're going to make a lot of money off people from Idaho. How's that? Well, nothing to do with the lack of sales tax, nothing to do with it's cheaper to buy groceries there, but to do with the pot shops coming in. They're not having but one, not two, but three marijuana shops in Ontario, Oregon. And as we said before, they believe that just like you build an outlet mall on at the border of a place that has a lower tax rate than you because you want your deals on your jeans or your shirts or what have you. The folks in Ontario, they're not the Ontarioites, but the people that are behind the pro-pot movement, they're ready. In fact, here's the headline. In Oregon border town, a windfall could come from marijuana sales to Idahoans. This is nothing more than the Statesman, again, continuing its effort to be pro-marijuana. Now, they haven't come out and said it, and maybe they have in an editorial. They've come out with other opinion pieces saying, it's only a matter of time before Idaho decides to join the rest of the world and smoke the dope. And as I've said before, I'm sure there are a lot of lovely people that smoke the dope. To me, I've never met one of them that has any initiative. I've never met one of them that has any enthusiasm. Now, look, I could be wrong. This show is not the world according to Kevin Miller, but from the piece in the Statesman, one sign of changing times in the conservative border town of Ontario, an old Oregon State police office and crime lab is about to become a marijuana dispensary, possibly the first pot shop to open in the city since voters lifted a ban on marijuana sales last November. And what were the folks that were against this outspent 6, 7, 10 to 1? It's just one of 4 marijuana dispensaries that Hotbox Farms plans to open in Ontario, and it has several other related businesses in the works. A CBD oil store could open up as soon as this spring, according to Stephen Meeland, Hotbox Farms LLC's co-owner. He said this to the Statesman last week. Now, again, you don't have to be a fan of Drug-Free Idaho or Keep Idaho or Kevin Miller to understand that this is going to change the very fabric of that beautiful town we call Ontario. You take a look at Colorado, you take a look at other places, we could go on, and maybe we will next hour. But the idea of sheerly making profit, and now you're going to have people in Idaho getting their pot legally, coming back into the state, smoking it illegally, is a concern. As is the lack of repeal, and thank you, Max, for that reminder, of the grocery tax. We'll get to that. Other people, my friend Kevin, great guy, wonderful man, great family guy, very responsible individual, elected official, saying, look, we can't afford to repeal the grocery tax. We need money. Well, we'll get to that. And there are other issues, Medicaid expansion and everything else, transportation, schools, you name it. But if you don't do something, they say, when is ever the right time to get a new job or to have a child or something of that? There never is. Right? But at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, the fact that you have people in the pot potpourri licking their chops, salivating over this, is quite troubling. Marijuana sales, which have proved popular in the interstate in Huntington, Oregon, could provide an economic jolt. Yeah, they think they're going to use that to fund utilities. Look, when the marijuana comes in, the crime goes up. You ask anybody that has been involved in drug treatment, in the criminal justice system, and there are no pro-pot people. It is just simply wrong. 580-5436, 580-KIDO, KIDO Talk Radio time, 6:57, Kevin Miller in the morning. Time for traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work.
7 Eric Everett.
And I'm Kevin Miller. Back to this point, a lot of people think they're going to have a huge influx of traffic maybe for the first few days. But I'm a firm believer that we've already got probably 80% of those people coming here shopping anyway. I could be wrong. Now you have one person who owns a local coffee shop, Tower House Coffee in Ontario. He's upset. He's disappointed that the city regulation of the new industry has effectively relegated the new dope shops to the outskirts of town near the interstate. We're hoping that it brings business to the downtown area. Well, wouldn't that be great if all of a sudden you can get your weed and then have a cup of coffee. You know, in the old days, you'd have your bacon or sausage and eggs, you'd have your real cup of coffee or a Sanka, and you'd start the day, and things would get done. Coming up, much, much more Fox News on your home for Fox News in the Treasure Valley. There's only one, well, two stations. 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.